Hello, everybody. My name is Vadims, and this is my colleague,
Tadej.
Tadej is working actually in the Adriatics teams with a lot of AdWords advertisers and also agencies, where he looks particularly at audience products. So he's actually very much expert in this area. So that's why we invited him today to kind of tell you a bit more about RLSA, why it's useful for you, why you should use search remarketing in your existing search campaigns, and how it can really maybe improve your current ad performance.
Let's jump in, right?
Yeah, let's jump into the presentation.
Sweet, cool. So search audiences. So one thing I want to say before is, and we're getting a lot of questions whether using RLSA and audiences, if that makes sense for everyone. Well, the thing is that it does, right? Because as you probably know, there's almost no industry, in the world where people just make spontaneous decisions, right on the spot, and they just say, "Hey, I want to buy this product," and it almost doesn't exist, right? So audience data basically, it tells you, how your customers behave that were on your website before, right? So, audience is pretty much something that, it's applicable for any kind of industry, any kind of advertising goals, either, you want to drive retention, you want to drive, kind of brand awareness. So it doesn't really matter if it's small or large business, right? So we're getting a lot of questions around that. So what we're going to touch today is a couple of things. So first off, we're going to dive into the very basics, right? So how do you kick off with RLSA? We're not going to go into the implementation because we know you have a lot of support articles, right, online. So we're just going to explain the very basic. Then we're going to go into the 5-step framework, which is kind of an upgrade. So what's next after you do the implementation, And then we're going to go to common mistakes and pitfalls. And the last part is going to be customer match.
Yoo-hoo! Woo. Sounds amazing.
It's pretty cool.
I'm really curious to hear more about customer match, because that's something new. And
that's pretty new.
So yeah, that's kind of important.
New, yeah. Cool. All right. Let's jump to the next to the first topic. So the RLSA basics. So as you guys probably know, not all of your users, all of your traffic is created equal. Let's put it this way, right? You have some visitors that are willing to spend more money than the others, right? Depending on how far they are in the conversion funnel, right? Some of them might just get on your website the first time. Some of them might return back for a couple of times, and all of those users are basically bringing different value to you, right? And it also depends on if the customer obviously on many other factors, right? So because of that, we kind of just treat all the customers the same way, right? If someone came to your website for the first time, obviously you're going to invest right, less money than on someone which is pretty much decided that they want to buy product on your website, right?
Yeah,
so
it makes sense. Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
So, and the customers that were on your website, they are way more likely to convert than someone that just came across your business, right? And I just want to throw some very basic statistics at you. I'm not going to be too detailed. That justify why remarketing in general is important, right? So first one, which is impressive, and I'm sure you guys are aware of, since you're an expert in especially since you come from an agency landscape, right? And 96% of the website traffic is not converting, right? So that's a huge number, right? So most of the people that are coming to your website are not doing anything, right? Yeah. Well, that doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to attract them back, right? But it's a huge number, right? And then we have 70% of people that are, they're picking a product, they're putting it in the basket, but they're not converting. So for some reason, they want to get more information.
So this is the audience, I guess, that we want to really target.
We basically want all three audiences. Also the ones that not necessarily go into the conversion basket, but obviously the ones that go into the conversion into the basket, they're more likely to convert, right? And there's another one. 49% of the people typically visit 2 to 4 sites before purchasing, right? So that's also a significant number. So there's almost no business. And I know you had one of the questions, right? There's almost no business where you really have that, instantaneous purchase. People nowadays, they compare pretty much for almost every product, obviously with the more complex purchases, especially in the B2B industry, the number of steps are going to, expand.
Yeah.
I remember I saw some statistic recently. I think it's a travel industry, in travel industry, people search between 10 to 15 resources before they actually, decide for
make that decision.
Final offer, And even if you think about yourself, and your last travel,
yeah,
I guess you didn't only check one website, right? So that's why, remarketing of any kind, if it's display or RLSA or video remarketing, is super important, right? So cool. Let's move on. And why remarketing lists for search ads are amazing? It's two things. One is what we've seen is that they drive a 53% lower CPA, so cost per conversion. And the second one,
are there actually particular industries where it's
no,
even
that's
higher?
general.
Just general.
That's general. Yeah, probably there are, but I mean, this very much depends on obviously how your website is also optimized. The way you create the ad tags and creatives.
Yeah.
But that's a general observation that we've seen across most of the accounts. And it drives 10% more in terms of conversions. So RLSA compared to regular search campaigns, right?
Yeah.
That's what we compare here. So cool. How it works, I guess you guys are familiar. We put a pixel on the website, we tag the website. It's just like with GDN remarketing. Nothing changes here, right? We create an audience list. That's the next step. And then we decide we can do GDN, we can do RLSA, we can do both, obviously, right? And then with RLSA, we target people basically that under two conditions, right? So one is they have to be on a remarketing list. That's one condition, right? And the second condition is that they have to type one of the keywords that is in that search campaign, right? So those are the two conditions that the people have to meet in order for us to show them the ads, right?
Yeah.
So as you can see, this is a very targeted campaign. In GDN, you pretty much target, without any, intention, because you basically place your ad across the network, right? Across the placement. Whereas here, we know that this is our previous visitor, right? That was on our website before. And obviously they have a clear intention because they type a keyword, right? So it's a very targeted ad format, basically. Do you want to ask something?
No. Continue. Yeah, I'm actually very curious to hear more actually on this. So let's go for it.
Right. And what's the whole idea about RLSA is nothing but when the user comes back, to the search, that we actually bid more, and we make sure that we assure a better position for the person that came back to the search campaign.
So why would you do that then?
Why would you do that? Great question. Well, because it's proven that the ads that are on the very top, they convert way better, right? You get a better CTR and better conversion rate on the very top positions.
Yeah.
And I suppose with the with the recent changes in and the removal of the right hand side ads, the RLSA is playing even a more important role, right? Because all of a sudden we reduce the number of ads. So it's essential, that you're really reaching the top positions when it comes to search campaigns. And I'm going to give you a very simple example, like to illustrate that. If we go back to the slides, so let's imagine, I don't know. Let's say you're buying a new car. I don't know. Are you buying a new car now, or?
Hopefully. Well, my dream car is a Ford Mustang, so hopefully buying that in the future at some point, maybe a couple of years time or so.
That's perfect. Amazing. So let's assume you went to the Ford Mustang website, right?
Yeah.
So you saw that amazing car. And then you were like, you know what? I'll just, I'll leave this aside for a while. I'll check a few other, brands. Which brands do you like? I don't know. Just give me a few.
Porsche.
Porsche, sweet. Okay. You're gonna go back to Google, right?
Yeah.
And you're gonna search for Porsche, and you're gonna search for, websites where you can compare cars and things like that, right?
Yeah.
So what Ford did is they're gonna capture your cookie. They're gonna remember that you were on their website. Pardon. And then what they're going to do is for every new query that you're going to type, which is kind of related, right, to to the car or automotive industry, they're going to place the ad in the search results, right? Because they know that you were on their website before, right? And they know that you might change your mind and come back. And,
so you want to kind of influence that consideration.
Exactly. You want to influence the consideration, and that's the whole idea. So the whole idea is basically bidding more aggressively on people that are coming back. Are your existing visitors, because you know that they're more likely to convert, right? Yeah. So that's the whole idea. When you add the RLSA, basically lists on your existing campaigns, make sure that you bid more aggressively, and we're going to talk about that also in a second. So as I mentioned, they're basically they convert the returning visitors. They convert 2 times more compared to the new visitors. So you really want to be aggressive when it comes to bid adjustments. Cool. So now we're going to go to the simple 5-step framework on how to go about RLSA campaigns. So we have kind of two basic segments. So two parts of the RLSA strategy. So one is the must-have, what we call it. The other one is advanced, nice to have.
So must-have is that what you would say every advertiser really needs to.
It's pretty much every advertiser, yeah.
That needs to have. Okay.
Yeah, and I'll explain why in a second. And when it comes to must-have, we have 3 parts. So one is target all website visitors. Second one is apply RLSA to all campaigns and groups. And third one is increase the bids for the top positions. And I'll explain now in details. So when I say target all websites, all website visitors, it pretty much means you tag your website, right, with the pixel, remarketing pixel, and then you just target. You add this remarketing list to all of your existing search campaigns. We're getting a lot of questions if it's better to add the remarketing list on existing search campaign or a new search campaign, to create a separate search campaign. To be honest, what we figured out that in 95 or even more % of the cases, it doesn't make sense to create a separate campaign. So what's that? Well, the reason is primarily because a lot of advertisers were just copying the campaign and keeping the same keywords and the same ad creatives. So in that case, really it doesn't make sense. So what we suggest is that you actually add the RLSA list on existing campaign and you set it up on the bid-only strategy. But if you really want to go more advanced and you want to expand keywords, you want to add more creatives for the people that are coming back, then we suggest a separate campaign. But in most of the cases, make sure that every single search campaign has the RLSA list added. And so the way to tag your website is obviously, you can use AdWords or you can use GA. If you have GA, we encourage you to use GA. And primary reason is, well, it's mostly because you can use more advanced techniques for segmenting your RLSA lists compared to AdWords. So
you would always suggest to use GA?
Yeah, if you have a GA, Google Analytics, then use.
Are there any cases like where you would just use AdWords instead of GA, like some sort of reasons?
I think if you have clients, that maybe they're not, because you're an agency obviously, and if they're not keen to share access to GA, then just go with AdWords.
That's usually trouble in Baltics.
Yeah, so if that's troubling, then go with AdWords. If it's not, then just use GA. Because obviously, the less text you have on your website, the better, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Because it's increasing your loading speed, right?
Yeah, and all that stuff. Yeah. And having too many tags everywhere, so that just becomes, I guess, a bit more complicated once you have a lot of remarketing lists.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's move on.
Cool. So what happens then, right? You tag your website with the remarketing list, and then what you need to do is to apply it to the entire account. And the reason why you wanted to apply it to entire account is obviously because you want to use the remarketing RLSA list in all the search campaigns, and second one is because you want to get the basic reporting on your audience. Because when you apply the RLSA list to your search campaign, what you're able to see in your AdWords reports, right, is you can compare the performance of returning visitors versus the new visitors, right? And that's a very important insight, So even if you're not willing at the very beginning to bid more aggressively on returning audience, just add the list, right? Just add it to all the campaigns to make sure it's there. And then
so you can see the difference, I guess.
So you can see the difference
in conversion rates and CTR and all of that. So just to prove, I guess, to the client down the bottom that it's actually worth and they should be investing more of the budgets for that.
And then once they're comfortable and they see the return, that the CTR, the CVR is better, then we say, okay, now let's increase the bids and bid more aggressively.
But you would say probably it takes about 4 weeks to really see that difference because some clients expect results straight away, because as we know, we need at least 1,000 users on the RLSA list, and it's sometimes tricky with some of the niche clients, I guess, that don't have that many users entering the site every day. So how long would you say what's the time span you would recommend to have a look at? Sort of 2 months, 3 months to really kind of see the difference between the new users and returning users?
I mean, to be completely honest, like if the clients are savvy with Google Analytics, or obviously you guys, then then I wouldn't even wait. I would go directly to Google Analytics and compare the performance, the overall performance of returning and new visitors, because we have that report in Google Analytics anyhow, right?
Yeah.
For the whole website, right? So I would just compare the report, and if we see way better performance on the returning visitors, I wouldn't even hesitate.
Yeah.
So I would add the remarketing list and start bidding straight away from the very start. Because what might happen sometimes is what actually happens if you only add the remarketing list without bidding more aggressively, you might not see the full impact. And we've seen instances where the clients are actually disappointed. Because what happens is if you don't bid more aggressively, you might not get sufficient enough volume to prove that the RLSA campaigns are working.
So
and then we're in trouble.
Economies of scale, I guess.
That's it.
That's what we need, especially with the small markets. Do you have the same sort of experience in Adriatics that it happens as well?
Same experience, yeah. And then we're going to touch that at the very end. Don't over-segment the remarketing list. Some clients, they want to go, they want to segment
super deep, I guess.
Super deep, like time duration, and then the purchasing funnel, and then another component, and you go so deep that you end up with, I don't know,
targeting to
1,000 clients, which is a very small number.
Okay, cool. So let's continue then onwards.
Yeah. So cool. So what bid only means for RLSA? A simple explanation, So bid only basically means that we're targeting the overlap between the keywords and the remarketing list, right? So we're targeting everyone that, we have them on the list. That's one, right? And second off, they typed one of the keywords that's in the campaign, right? We're gonna touch. For bid only, small change, small comment. For bid only, it means that we're targeting new users primarily, right? So people that weren't on our website before. But if there's someone, if someone appears that was on our website before, so it's returning, we can bid more aggressively. That's the whole idea, right? So if you look at the circles,
So when you say bid more aggressively, so what's the sort of recommended kind of, way do you see really, what's the bid adjustment? So a lot of clients ask how much should I bid? 10, 20%, 30%?
Yeah.
What are the things that you look at?
We're going to go through the formula later. So there are some global benchmark, which is around 40%.
Yeah.
But what we suggest is that you always do a calculation. So
how much do you actually need?
How much you need to increase. And we have a formula in the later slides, and we're going to go through that. But what's important to know here is bid only, you use it when you add RLSA lists on existing campaigns, because you want new traffic still to come in, but then if we get some returning users, right, we want to bid more aggressive. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, it makes sense to me. I mean, I also work with RLSA. I hope it makes sense to the audience. However, if it doesn't, please do send us an email through the support, or do give us a call. I mean, we're going to go more in depth right now. But if you have any questions, just maybe write them down and just give us a call maybe after the webinar at any time. So yeah,
that makes sense.
Let's move on.
Cool. Let's move on to the next thread. Oh, sorry, one more. Because I know you guys from agencies, you're using AdWords Editor, right?
Yeah. Hopefully. A lot, actually. Well, it depends on the country, but yeah, in Baltics we use quite a bit.
So make sure you do all the implementation through the AdWords Editor, because it's way easier, and you can, just do the implementation across all the campaigns without going into, one ad group after another. So it's very simple. You go under Manage section, you select keywords and targeting, and then you have audiences. And then what's important is that you have to change for all ad groups. You have to change the bid strategy first to bid only. And then all the ad groups are going to change to bid only, and then you can add in bulk RLSA lists to all the ad groups and campaigns.
Cool.
And my suggestion would be, whenever you get a new client in to your agency, make sure that this is like site links or call out extensions. Just add it straight away. Don't wait, for lists to build out. Just make sure that this is a part of like what we call AdWords hygiene. It's always there.
Always ready to be added.
It's always ready to be added, yeah. And I'm not saying because it's a cool product, although it is. But it's really like when it comes to audience product, audience is not a separate product, but it's just the way to target people that are coming back from your website back to Google search. So
yeah. I mean, Yeah, I totally agree with you. So let's move on to the.
Yeah. So then, what the next step is? Obviously, once you apply it to all the campaigns, then you want to raise the bids, right? Why you should be raising lists is obviously because returning customers, like we said before, they're converting, twice the rate of the regular new traffic. And the way to make those, first off, what should I be bidding, right? That's a very common question, right? So I'm going to give you a very simple example, So we have a max CPC at 0.50, right? We have an average position of 3.2. And then the question we always get, should I just make a bid adjustment of 20%, so they just come up with some ballpark bid adjustment, right? And now let's assume that the top of the page is actually 0.80, right? So what will happen in this case is 20% will only increase your bid by 10 cents, right? To 0.60, which is still not going to be enough to actually appear at the very top spot for the returning visitors, right? Which is not enough, right? So make sure you're aggressive, right? And that you're bidding enough to appear at the very top position, right? Yeah. So the best practice is actually check what is the top of the page bid, right? And then calculate how much extra do you need to appear on the top of the page, right? Yeah. So that's one of the examples. And another way to do it is we have a relative CPA formula. So this formula enables you basically to calculate the precise bid adjustment for RLSA lists. And the way to do it is, let's take an example where we have all visitors CPA. So this is all visitors returning and new. It's 60. And we have returning visitors CPA. It's 20, right? And the way to calculate the bid adjustment is all visitors CPA divided by returning visitors CPA minus 1 times
100, yeah.
And use the brackets. To be mathematically correct.
So in this case, it's 200% that we should be making.
200%, yeah. I know it's a huge number, but just don't get scared, really, because even 200% in some cases, it's a very small amount in terms of.
So I guess for those 80 cents, 200%, that means €2.40. Yeah. In this case, but of course, then we have to look at what is the conversion rate, how much we're paying for every single client. Sometimes it makes sense, and I think that you can bid up to 300%. Is that correct? Yeah. Awesome. Okay, cool.
So just make sure you're aggressive. Like, don't be
shy, I guess.
Don't be shy. Don't be shy. No, it's because we're getting a lot of cases where either people don't bid or they go with 3% or 4%.
And some weird numbers, I guess, like 19%, 18%. Some people have different calculations.
Exactly. Yeah. So like, just use the CPA, or if you don't have the CPA, you can even use the CTR or conversion rate. It goes by the same principle in a way. And yeah.
So here's the time frame, I guess, for this formula. You select like 30 days, like 4 weeks at least, to be statistically significant in this. There's no point just selecting 1 week or 2 weeks because things change week on week. Exactly. So the bigger you go, I guess the better the quality of the bid adjustment will be.
And one thing I want to point out also is in the previous slide we mentioned the average position. In some cases you might see an average position of 1. And then I get a lot of questions like, okay, I have an average position of 1, so why should I bid more? Well, the fact is that the average position of 1 only means that you're achieving that position in the auctions that you actually took part and you had an impression. But there, as you know, there's this thing called lost impression share.
Yeah.
So although you have a good average position in all the auctions that you took part, you might still be losing 20, 30, 40% of the impressions because your bids were too low.
So RLSA can help them, I guess.
RLSA can help you increase the impression share or lower the lost impression share.
Yeah, that's what we need actually. So
cool. All right. Bidding strategies. So one thing that I really encourage you guys is once you have the RLSA set up and you're bidding more aggressively, try to use automated bidding strategies like eCPC, target CPA, target ROAS. It's going to make your life way easier, and it's proven to work with the RLSA because it's going to automatically adjust bids for the returning customers. So once you have enough data for enhanced CPC and the CPA, use those strategies. And
so when you say enough data, how many Is that we're talking here conversions, I guess, and how many conversions would that be?
So it's like with the CPC. I think with the CPCs, like we recommend around 50, as far as I remember.
In the last 30 days.
30 days, and I think CPA is 150. Roughly.
150.
Yeah. So in most of the cases,
that doesn't make to switch on CPA if you only have like 50.
No,
I mean,
no, doesn't make sense.
You usually see like, well, I guess not the best results out of it.
Yeah,
so kind of good goes slowly and kind of structured, right?
Exactly.
So I guess for like, the first 2-3 months, do eCPC, and then if it shows good results, then if you want to kind of
CPA.
CPA and then target ROAS.
Yeah. I mean, if you're missing conversion data, one way to do it is maybe to implement the SMART goals, because with SMART goals you usually get more conversions in, and then maybe this is how you can opt into CPA and make sure it works.
Yeah. So whatever that could be also user engagement, I guess.
With user engagement, bounce rate, time on site,
could be pretty much anything as long as we get at that. More and more of those conversions, I guess. Cool. All right. And cool. Move on.
So we're going to go to a bit more advanced steps now. So one is segmenting lists based on the conversion funnel and the time, and then adding new keywords. So what can we do next is basically we can create, and this is a bit more advanced, is we can create a couple of remarketing lists based on how deep the customer went into our website, right? So we can have several lists, like all the homepage visitors, all the people that went to category page, all the people that actually checked the specific products, right? So the product page, and all the people that went to the cart and they abandoned the cart, right? And we can create several lists, right? And obviously the deeper, the further the customer is going to go down, right, to the basket, the more aggressively we're going to bid.
Because it's more valuable, I guess.
Because it's more valuable, more likely to convert, right? And here are a couple of recommendations for retail, and later on I'm going to show you for travel, how you can bid. For example, in the retail, this is a benchmark. It's a global suggestion. For all visitors, we suggest 40%, and then deeper you go, right, the more you bid. So, for example, for cart abandoners, we would bid 120%, right?
Yeah.
But again, this is benchmark. The very best practice is that you actually calculate yourself. But if you can't for some reason, then you can use the benchmark. So this is, for example, for travel.
So why would you bid? So I'm just looking at these numbers, and of course they're quite interesting for our agencies. I'm just sort of thinking, why would you bid then plus 160% for the purchases, or in this case package bookers?
Yeah, well, they're just like way more likely to convert. I don't know the exact number. This is a benchmark, so we took into consideration hundreds of accounts from the travel industry, and we just did an analysis, and it showed us that in most of the cases we should bid 160% more. But then again, it very much varies, so what I would really encourage you is just to calculate yourself. Right?
So I guess the idea behind here is if they made one booking, they might be making another one because, for example, they had a good experience. I don't know, they had a really good flight, and then they just might book another one in 2 or 3 months' time, and so that's why you should be bidding a bit more, so they come back to you and book another flight. Because I guess it's still going to be profitable at the end of the day.
Of course,
Awesome.
Cool. And then another strategy is basically going beyond 30 days, because I know a lot of you are just, you stick to those 30 days because it's set up by default. But what we realize is actually that in a lot of industry, we get, customers beyond 30 days, right? So make sure that you create several lists that go beyond just 30 days. And you can expand the RLSA lists to the 180 days of cookie duration. So meaning that you can target people, returning users, 180 days after they left your website, right? In fact, the best practice is immediately when you create RLSA lists, just create different lists like 14 days, 21, 30, 60, 90.
And see which ones convert better, I guess.
Exactly, And then you just add them to the campaign. Obviously a bit more aggressively on shorter lists, like 3, 7, and so on. And then you just play around with that, But it's very important, and it's basically regardless the industry. We're seeing that in a highly complex purchase industries and also low complexity purchases, we're seeing the importance of targeting your returning visitors.
I guess you can make here hundreds of lists, but if you would advise, sort of what would be your advice in here? So to have 180, 30 days, maybe 90 days, How many lists would you
It's like
advise?
four, maybe like 30,
Yeah.
60, 90, 180, for example. Yeah.
See what makes sense, I guess,
what makes sense.
depending
And
on
also
the
check Google Analytics. In Google Analytics, you have the path length report.
Mhm.
So just check, what is the average time to conversion for
Yeah.
for their customers, and then make decisions based on that.
Based on that.
That will make more sense.
Yeah.
Cool. And then the last thing is basically extend to new keywords, right? So with this one, we're going to focus on actually creating new campaigns, creating separate RLSA campaigns where we add new keywords and new ad text, right? And it's very simple. So the whole idea is that we create a separate campaign, we add the RLSA list, we set up the bidding on target and bid, right? We expand keywords, we add more more generic, pure generic keywords. We, if possible, customize the text ad, and ideally also lead to a different landing page.
Why would you customize that?
I'm going to give you a simple example. Let's say, so let's go back to your Ford Mustang. I think that's a great example. So, let's say that you left the Ford website.
Yeah.
You're going to go back to Google, and let's say you're going to search for a very broad terms. When you go back to Google, let's say you're going to search for a term car reviews, or you're going to search for a term how to buy a car, or even maybe secondhand cars, for example, right? And those are typically the keywords that you wouldn't bid on for the new visitors, right? Because they're just insanely expensive, right?
Yeah.
They're so expensive.
It wouldn't make much sense, I guess.
Exactly. You can burn all the budget like that, right? So, but if you know that person that's typing that particular keyword was on your website before, right? Then you can kind of say, how about we still target them because they were on our website, they're aware of our website, and there's a chance that they're going to come back, right?
Yeah.
And this is the case where you can use target and bid strategy, and bring your customer back to your website.
But I guess in this case, we use a broad match. Not use like hundreds of keywords. I guess strategic kind of broad match keywords that make sense to your client.
Yeah. And ideally, what's great is if you have content on your website for those keywords. If someone's going to search how to buy a car, I think it's better if you make sure that you lead them to your website where you actually explain how to buy a car, not directly to Ford Mustang. Yeah, they're going to be disappointed.
Buy now.
And the quality score. Yeah, exactly. That's not how it works. But so that's one way to do it. And the last thing is obviously, we mentioned this, so you have to use target and bid strategy in this case, right? So we had some questions before about if we can use DSA campaigns coupled with RLSA. Yes, we can. So for those of you who don't know, DSA campaigns are an optimized search campaign that match search queries to your website. So in a way, they automatically create search ads for you, right? And I know a lot of you have been using the DSA. So the good thing is that you can use RLSA with DSA. So it works incredibly well. So if you have any clients that use DSA, make sure you add.
So would you have maybe any sort of example clients where this has worked maybe particularly well, or like an industry where this has worked particularly well?
Especially e-commerce, I think.
E-commerce,
e-commerce stores. You mean DSA with RLSA?
Yeah.
E-commerce. Yeah. Especially the website with a lot of content, which is well optimized and well indexed in Google, because DSA works really well if the SEO part is done well.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
it might be a bit tricky sometimes.
In some cases, yeah.
So do you have the same sort of? Do you have like tricky clients in Adriatics as well?
Yeah.
And what would be your advice, kind of sort out the website before going to
before going to DSA? Solve the website. Make sure that you have the the categories structured properly, that the URLs are fixed and all that stuff, and then go for it. Yeah.
Cool. All right, let's move on.
Cool. So common mistakes to avoid, just a couple of things. So don't do over segmentations, right? We mentioned that. Start with maybe just the list duration. So segmentation based on list duration or the funnel, right? Segmentation. And the second thing is don't go with small tests. Make sure you bid aggressively on the remarketing lists.
And you have to set aside, I guess, a budget, maybe agree with the client.
For example, yeah. Just be brave.
Be brave, yeah, and ask for more, yeah. I guess it's about, explaining RLSA and the benefits of the RLSA from an agency perspective to the client, and why you should, maybe they should be even setting aside even a bigger budget than having a budget, let's say, for the new user, because of course the new user is going to be more expensive. It just maybe makes sense if he has a huge RLSA list, maybe just concentrate on that, primarily maybe on that rather than on new users. It just really depends on the business, I guess.
Cool.
So yeah, now I guess it's the customer match part.
Yeah, cool. So I guess you guys already know that roughly, I think it was 3 months ago.
Yeah, I think sometime around November when customer match got introduced.
Oh, so November, sorry, yeah, it was way before, yeah. So we launched Customer Match, which is a new feature that essentially enables you to, import all of your emails. It has to be your email, not the third-party email, to AdWords, and then, target people when they're logged in with their email across YouTube, search, and Gmail ads. So it's a pretty cool feature because this time you're actually targeting a specific user rather than a cookie, right?
Yeah.
Which is pretty awesome, I guess.
Yeah.
So we're just gonna dive into that a bit. We're not gonna go into details, but if you have any questions, just
comment, I guess, below the video. Oh yeah.
Yeah, or just
call us.
Give us a call, yeah. So when it comes to Customer Match, obviously it helps strengthen the connections with your known customer base, right? So the people that bought a product on your website or they subscribe to an email, and to forge a relationship right across YouTube, Gmail, and search, right? So obviously there are a couple of strategies when it comes to Customer Match. So one is you can target customers. When it comes to AdWords in general, you can target customers that you know already, right? By adding, customer match lists to your campaign. You can exclude those lists. For example, if you have a campaign where you don't want to target people that you have in your database that bought the product already, you can exclude them, right? Or you can reach users that are similar to that, customer match lists. So we can create similar audiences based on the customer match list. So you have different strategies that you can apply.
And I guess, the similar list is being created after a while.
Yeah, it's created after a while. Once it gets populated, it takes some time. So how does Customer Match works, or how do you implement it? So first thing, you have to upload first-party data in AdWords as an audience list. So you go to shared library, you create you click on plus remarketing list, you select Customer Match, and then what you need to have is a CSV or Google spreadsheet file that you import to AdWords. It has to contain emails from your audiences, right, from your customers. And then when you import it, we're going to match the email addresses with Google accounts. So essentially, we're going to check if, Tadej or Vadims, if they exist in the Google world, if they have their own Gmail account. And then we're going to match that. And then once this is created, you can apply this to search, YouTube, or Gmail.
And what happens if you, for example, use an alternative email address to log into your Google account?
So we're going to look for, even if you don't have a Gmail addresses, we're going to check if that person is potentially using a Gmail address. So let's say that you have, yourself, you have an address, Vadims at...
Yeah, but Vadims at inbox.lv, actually.
What is that?
Well, it's an alternative provider.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, so we're going to check then if Vadims have a Gmail address as well, if that person, and then we're going to match it. If that's not the case, then
I'm not going to see that ad, I guess.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm sorry about that. So cool. So this is how you do it in shared library. It's very simple, right? So you name the list, you select the database, you import the file, then you select the membership duration. Default is 180 days, but you can play around, with shorter lists. That's
and I guess here where we I just saw like you see in the slide, there's an email opt-out link. Would you suggest actually having that in there?
Absolutely, yeah. It's a legal thing. You have to allow your customers to opt out. from the customer.
But I guess in terms of performance, that would, I guess, also improve, right? Because there'll be less impressions, and of course, then your CTR might be a bit higher.
You mean if you add an opt-out link?
Oh yeah, let's say a lot of people opt out of, let's say, seeing these ads. And they'll be taken out. So they will be taken out of the list. It will be generating less impressions. I guess your CTR might be a bit going a bit higher.
Oh yeah, because it's going to be more relevant for the people that are totally of course and it's also a legal thing, so you have to allow your customers to opt out if they don't want to see your ad, right?
Yeah.
So
and you do, I guess, here as well a lot of manual work. So if you have to re-upload the list and all that, so it's a bit time consuming, I would say.
It's a bit time consuming, but we have to do it.
Yeah, that's true.
So, and then the whole list is processing, and we're matching emails with Gmail addresses, and that's it pretty much, right? So just a few use cases on how you can use the customer match. So one is to drive new sales, right? So the idea is to, for example, cross-sell complementary products. Let's say if we go back to Ford Mustang, let's say you bought one, and then we can upsell you,
a Porsche.
Well, if you have the budget for that, then yes. But let's say we can sell you, I don't know, accessories, or I don't even know.
For Mustang, I guess new tires, winter tires or something.
Yeah, something. I'm not a big fan of cars, so I don't even know what are you supposed to upsell, And so obviously the use cases example, driving sales, hyper efficient bidding. You can segment your email lists and bid on key profiles in search.
Mm-hmm.
You can target the highest value customers, right? You can exclude them if you don't want to target them. And then the third thing is obviously build loyalty of existing customers, right? So let's say that's what we call churn, right? Mm-hmm. So if you have a list of clients that they haven't bought with you for 3 months, so they're churned, right? They're not coming back. Mm-hmm. You can re-engage them. You can tell them, hey, because you were with us before, and we care about you, we want to offer you, 25% on any purchase on our website, for example.
Well, I guess maybe 10 years down the line, I might buy the next edition of Ford Mustang,
for example,
and that email address might be useful for you. So
exactly. That's it. Cool. And that's pretty much it, I guess. I know we have questions now, right?
Yeah, we actually have some questions. Cool. We get a lot of actually questions asked by the agencies, so we compiled some questions and got the most interesting out of these database, I guess, of questions that we have. And we'll start with the first one, probably with the easiest one first. So, what are the most common implementation issues with RLSA? What would you say are like the number 1, 2, 3? Or...
I think that's a great question. Yeah. So in a lot of cases, you have different kind of issues. For some clients, is obviously a legal issue. Mm-hmm. They still don't have the remarketing code on their website. So they have to first solve with their legal departments and lawyers. How to do it properly and all that stuff. So I guess that's one of the issues.
So banks maybe and governments and all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So this type of businesses. I think the second one is then for clients to really understand. It's not really a technical issue, but it's really to understand the value of returning visitors, and really to showcase them what does it mean in terms of conversion rate and CTR and CPA when you compare, existing returning customers versus new customers,
Mm-hmm.
And I think this, you guys as an agency, it's important that, you export some reports from GA, Google Analytics, and you show to the clients the value of returning visitors,
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And I think that's pretty much it. There's really not much work when it comes to RLSA audiences, because it literally just means, the initial step, just means adding the lists on existing campaigns, and then slowly adjusting bids.
And they kind of grow that.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not, it's way easier than, for example, I don't know, dynamic remarketing or regular display remarketing. When you have to do all the creatives and things like that. So.
Okay, and probably the next question is what we also get a lot, particularly from Latvia and Estonia. They're just not necessarily sure how they should segment or which of the lists would most likely bring in the best return on investment, really. with the ad spend. So looking at Adriatics, what sort of list do you see generating well, good amount of, I guess, of conversions, or conversion rates pretty high, or is the cost per conversion pretty low? Like, what sort of lists have you seen?
I think in our region, it's mostly just a cookie duration list.
Yeah.
So it's 30, 60, 90, 180. We've seen that as a best practice, especially because, you know, Adriatics, I guess just like Latvia, you know, it's a small volume market, you know, where you cannot really segment in such detail. So we've seen good results on just lists that are segmented based on cookie duration, you know. But again, I would encourage you guys, you know, to open Google Analytics and just try to find some clues inside Google Analytics, you know. So a good example would be go into the path length report, which is showing you how long it took for an average customer to convert. Was it, you know, 3 days, 5 days, 1 week, 30 days? And then within that, try to decide on what's going to be your RLSA strategy, right? So if you see that, you know, the biggest ROI is in customers that convert after the 3 days when they visited your website, that's a clear indicator that you need to have a 3-day remarketing list and bid insanely aggressively on that specific remarketing list. So that's the best thing I think you can do. You know?
Cool. Thanks for that. There's another question that also gets frequently asked. So we're talking about that you could separate a campaign and have a target and bid for the separate RLSA kind of campaign, and then a lot of agencies don't necessarily utilize also bid only for their main campaigns where they target new users. Do you think it's wise kind of to also include also in the main campaign like a bid only?
Oh, so they have a separate campaign with target and bid.
Target and bid, yeah.
And they have regular search campaign.
Yeah, regular search campaign.
Okay. Yeah, no, this is actually, so like I just explained earlier, so in 95% of the cases, it doesn't make sense to build separate RLSA campaigns. We've seen that across multiple accounts globally, that there's absolutely no difference. Where that really makes sense is when you build a separate campaign and expand keywords. You know, you add them to broad match, you add new keywords, you change ad creatives and things like that, right?
But I guess budgets might be another question. So let's say if you want to allocate a particular budget for that RLSA campaign, that may be...
Okay, that makes sense. I have two answers to that, you know. I get that completely, and I'm having the same argument in case of a lot of my agencies, you know. First thing, what's important to know is that, you know, RLSA, and I know that, you know, a lot of agencies are treating RLSA as a separate product, you know, and that's fine, because, you know, I know that, you know, that's something they want to offer to their clients. You know, maybe they pack it in a separate, you know, offering. But what's important to know is, you know, RLSA is not a separate product in an essence. But RLSA is just something that you add. It's an audience that you add on top of your campaigns, right?
It's like an add-on, I guess.
It's like an add-on. It's like a you know, it's like I mentioned before. It's like a site link, you know, that you just add on existing campaigns, you know. I mean, in fact, to be honest, you know, returning visitors, you're gonna have it on your search campaign anyhow, right? So if you add the RLSA list or not, the RLSA list only enables you to see what's the amount of, you know, returning visitors that are coming back to your campaign, right? Then it's just a question if you're going to bid more or not, right? So, like my question, my suggestion would be, if you really want to have separate budget, and this is something, you know, that you committed to your clients, you're going to have a separate budget. You know, just keep it as it is. You know, just keep a separate campaign. But for, you know, future campaigns, I would really encourage to add to existing campaigns.
Cool, thank you. So the next question comes from actually a Estonian agency. In this case, is why offer, for example, RLSA to clients whose customer journey is actually very short?
Yeah, I really want to see that case. I mean, like I mentioned before, there's really not a lot of cases where purchases are super impulsive unless you sell chewing gums, and even if it is, the way to object this is that maybe that person that bought a chewing gum, he's gonna buy another one. I'm just I'm giving a very bad example. I know it's not the best example, but let's imagine that someone buys a chewing gum. Let's say they buy it within 1 day, but that doesn't mean they're not going to come back in 4 days or 1 week. And so that's my argument. Even if the time to purchase is extremely low, RLSA is good for building long-term loyalty. They might come back in 1 week, 14 days, 60 days, 90, 180, or whenever. And truth to be told, we're seeing in more and more products that we think that the time length is very short, but it's not, in fact. And people tend to do a lot of research. They tend to compare, they look for reviews. It's not like they just visit a website and just trust everyone and just buy the product straight away. I really haven't. I worked with like different verticals, and I haven't seen such example. I don't know. Have you?
Personally, no. So it was just actually interesting to explore whether in Adriatics you have seen something something like that. So
not really. Not that I remember. I mean, it usually takes way longer. For more. Well, in fact, we had an example. I think. Let me think. It was what do you call it? The insurance for car accidents, I think. Right. So what happened is, so obviously a lot of those. No, sorry, it wasn't insurance, but it was I think a legal support.
Legal advice,
legal advice or something like that. So obviously, when that happens, is usually when you have a car accident, right? Or you get into trouble. So the argument was, why would I add this if most of the conversions are happening within 1 or 2 days, right? So why would I do that, And what we figured out is, first off, it's a huge competition, right, on the market, right? So this is the industry that, at least in our region, it's very competitive. A lot of offerings, and usually the decision making took a bit longer than 1 day, right? Not just 1 day. Let's say 3 days, for example. So one of our arguments was, let's build 3-day lists, and let's bid really aggressively on the 3-day lists. If the customers are going to go on, from compared to from one website to another, and it worked pretty well. And the other argument was, okay, but just because that client bought one product, one service, that doesn't mean that after 9 or 12 months that person is going to come back again for something else. Who knows what, So
because they enjoy the great service, maybe.
Enjoy the great service. It might happen again. It might need another legal advice for something which is completely else. So why would you just ignore that audience and just keep them floating around?
Around the web. So this question is actually a bit more complicated, so I'm going to read it out to you. It comes from one of our Lithuanian agencies. So what happens if a user multiple list searches for a keyword which in multiple ad groups, each serving to a different audience? So for example, if a user is on a homepage list and also on a list which is called prior purchases, and there are ad groups which each of these audiences, and they use this keyword as well.
So we'll have two campaigns, same keywords.
Same keywords in 2 different ad groups, and he's the same user is on 2 different lists. It would be and so
I think it's the same thing as in regular search campaigns. Obviously, the keywords will compete between each other, so it's not the best practice. So make sure that you only have that keyword in one campaign, in one ad group, so there's no overlap.
Okay,
because just like in regular search campaign, the keyword is going to compete between campaigns.
Cool.
Was that?
Yeah, I did answer. Just a question on that, just to be clear.
So what he was saying is two separate campaigns.
Or ad groups.
Same keyword, let's say Ford Mustang.
Yeah.
And in both campaigns, same audience list or different?
Different audience lists, but the user is on two different audience lists.
So one user, so both audience lists have
the same.
Vadims.
Yes, Vadims. Yeah, exactly.
On that case, it really doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
But we don't know whether that user is in both of the lists, I guess. So
well,
sometimes you wouldn't know.
If you have one list, let's say 30 days, and the other one 60 days. So in this case, it might make sense. You know, so if you have one campaign, so let's say we have two campaigns, both of them have keyword Ford Mustang, right? And then one of them we're targeting 30 days, the other one we're targeting 60-day users. In this case, it does make sense. But what we have to make sure that on 60 days campaign, we exclude the 30 days. So essentially, that we only target between 30 and 60 days.
Yeah, that makes sense.
In that way, we're not going to have the overlap. That's the only
kind of way forward for that. Yeah. Okay, cool. And then another interesting question also is coming from Latvia actually this time. So what happens if a user is on a list that you exclude, and then he's on another list that you include?
So one list that you exclude on one campaign, and then the other same.
No, same ad group. So for example, you're adding two lists, and so that one user is on an exclusion list and also on inclusion list in this case. So what would happen then?
It's not going to show.
Not good. So the ad won't show at all.
Because like primary rule, you tell them, okay, I want to target this person, but then you say, I don't want to target. So there's no impression.
So I guess there will be no impression for that. Okay.
There's that many questions.
Well, our agencies always have a lot of questions to ask, and that's all good. However, if you have more questions, please leave them in the comments, and we'll answer later for you as well. And the last question, I guess, for today, for this video. So we talk sometimes about like different ad text as well. I know we kind of covered it a bit as well. So what sort of different ad text would you use for target and bid campaigns? A lot of advertisers and also a lot of agencies are not necessarily sure what sort of ad text you would include in there. What have you seen maybe in Adriatics working really well that drives maybe a very high CTR?
So I think it all goes back to, just like in case of regular search campaigns, you have to add to the ad the text that is relevant to a specific keyword. That's as simple as it is. So if in your keyword you have Ford Mustang, you have to mention Ford Mustang. If you have if the keyword is how to buy a car, that has to be in the ads creative. But what we've seen is a lot of advertisers are adding different what should I call it, discounts or special offers for returning visitors. In a sense that they say 10% off, or or they point out some other benefits of the website, like free delivery or money back guarantee or things like that. And then it's just basically testing different approaches, and see what really works, But I think the most important thing is really to think about what does someone that types that specific keyword, what do they expect? What is it that they want to see in the ad? Or what would you like, if you were a user, what would you like to see in the ad? And then later on the website, So again, Ford Mustang, if you type, how to buy a car, you're not going to say in the ad, buy Ford Mustang, but you're going to say 5 steps for an amateur to buy their first car, right? And then you're going to redirect to the website that actually talks about that content, right? Rather than, and then obviously sell Ford Mustang, but at the very end, right? It's not the main content. So it's always just think about the user and the keywords that are in that specific RLSA campaign.
What do you want to show him kind of the second time?
And it's, again, you have quality score. Like, you shouldn't forget about that, right? There's still quality score present. So if your ads and landing page is going to be completely irrelevant, even in RLSA, it's going to punish you for not doing a good job with your ads.
Okay. And I guess also kind of a bit more on this. So when we talk about coupons, have you seen also agencies or advertisers using a different landing page? So it will be the same domain, but a different landing page where, for example, discount is already applied, or
I've seen that, but in that case, you have to do a separate target and bid campaign. But yeah, we've seen advertisers doing that. Yeah.
And what would you say is more successful? Do you?
No, like for most of the SMBs,
Yeah,
just keep it simple. Like don't have separate landing pages
okay.
and all that. It makes life so much more complicated, you know.
So it's better to use kind of like a I don't know, a discount system where you get a coupon, just enter it and go through the site. Yeah,
for example.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Tadej. I hope you enjoyed today the video. I mean, if you like the video, please leave a like at the bottom of the video. And if you got any questions, also put them in the comments. Give us a call, write to us, whatever is the more convenient for you. And yeah, probably till next time when we're going to discuss again something a bit more advanced, particularly for the agencies because they're looking for that advanced stuff and what to do in this and that case. So hopefully it was very valuable. And yeah, till next time. Bye-bye.